Hey everyone! Welcome to the wildrift patch 4.3c jungle tier list. In here, I'll be ranking all of the viable junglers from the weakest up until the strongest. Take note that this is only my personal preference and each champion can be moved in a higher tier depending on mastery. Without further ado, let's get into it. Going to the list, we're gonna make things a little bit different and manually be putting each champion onto their tier. That way, we can provide a short explanation and ensure that no jungler gets left behind. So let's get started. Aatrox, really strong champion in the meta right now, will go on the S+ tier. Having good clear speed, strong side lane, perfect team fights, good catch potential, and definitely carry potential, he deserves this tier since if he's able to get a reset, he can just 1v9 those fights. Amumu is a solid A tier pick. Despite having strong team fights and catch potential and decent clear speed, he just lacks that side lane control and carry potential is dependent on how his teammates would be able to follow up. Camille, I think, is a solid S tier pick, having great side lane, decent team fights, strong catch and carry potential, but lacks a bit on clear speed, pretty slow early game. She needs to get her first item before she becomes really strong. Diana, a really good S tier pick. She can also do everything from clearing, side lane, team fights, decent catch, and good carry potential. The only reason why she's not S+ tier is because she's more of a follow-up champion rather than someone that can just go in and instantly win a fight. Darius, despite being an easy champion to play, falls on the B tier when it comes to the jungle. Even though he has decent clear speed and strong catch potential, he heavily relies on getting resets of the ultimate, and if you play solo queue, it's hard to get an ulti of Darius because of the fact that the opponents are able to escape or your teammates just steals your kill. That's why he needs a good team effort in order to pull this champion off. Dr. Mundo, unfortunately, this is gonna be our first C tier champion due to the fact that he really lacks the CC and carry potential. Even though he's very tanky, he heavily relies on his team to carry him. Echo, on the other hand, I think this is a solid A tier champion. Really strong late game, but he's not that strong in the early game and needs items in order to pop off. Eve is a solid S tier pick with insane clear speed, decent team fights, and crazy catch and carry potential. The only reason why she's not in the S+ tier is because she's a bit snowbally who needs kills in order to pop off. If you get behind on Eve, it's gonna be hard to play this champion. Fiora is another A tier champion who has insane carry potential but lacks the early game presence in order to have a good impact on your team. Fizz is also similar to Eve but a little bit worse, who is a strong jungler when ahead but very weak when behind, dependent on if you're able to get kills early on. Graves, even though he got buffed a lot, I think he just falls on B tier because of the fact that the other carry junglers just do things better than him right now. I'm not sure what they need to do to Graves in order to make this champion a lot stronger. Gragas is a champion that is a jack of all trades, meaning that he would be able to build tanky, AP, engage, and peel for your team. The only reason why he's not S tier is because he's a master of none, wherein he doesn't specialize on anything, making him a strong pick but not a broken champion. Speaking of broken, Gwen is really strong when it comes to the late game, but she just falls on A tier due to the lack of presence in the early game. You need to pray that your team doesn't lose before the 10-minute mark because Gwen will most likely scale once you have 2 items. Hecarim, the newest champion in Wildrift, is definitely an S+ tier champion. Insane clear speed, strong side lane, insane team fights, catch and carry potential. He can do everything in the meta right now. No visible weakness and is a champion that you must spam if you want to easily climb your ranks. The only champion that can possibly counter this is Volibear, but what Hecarim can do is just kill his teammates rather than going for the 1v1. Irelia has fallen from grace, will currently be in the B tier because she is very team dependent, needing a good early game as well as frontline in order for her to follow up properly. If Gragas was the jack of all trades when it comes to AP, Jarvan is the jack of all trades when it comes to AD. Similar to Gragas, he would be able to tank and carry at the same time, but he does not excel on either of those. So he's dependent on his team on what build he will go for. Jax, I think, falls on a similar boat as Gwen, wherein even though he has insane late game, his early game is just really weak and would need time in order for him to scale. Jay's a very underrated jungler. He's actually in the S tier. Decent clear speed, strong side lane, insane poke, team fight, and damage. If you're able to get ahead with this champion, you could definitely carry the game. The only problem with this champion, if he falls behind, then it's very hard for him to catch up and does not have that 1v9 capability, relies a bit on his teammates in order to get a good engage. Kai'Sa is a champion that became viable in the jungle, but ever since the nerfs, she has now fallen into the B tier. She currently has really slow clear and needs a team to be built around her to become effective. Kayle falls on a similar boat, but a bit worse on the early game and will be our second C tier champion. If you want to play a jungler that goes AFK from levels 1 to 9, then this is most probably your pick. Not recommended to use on ranked games. Kayn is a solid S tier champion, especially if you go blue. If you're able to get your farm early plus early kills, then he's gonna be super annoying to play against. The only issue with this champion is getting his form. Very dependent on the opposing lineup. If they have a lot of melee, then it's hard for this champion to snowball early on. Kha'Zix currently is the best assassin jungler dispatch, putting him in the S+ tier. Even though his early game clear speed is lackluster, he makes up for it with his insane burst, objective control, and catch potential. If you're able to get early kills with this champion, you could just keep catching the carries and help your team win the game. Lee Sin is a champion that I'd usually put in the S+, but despite the recent buffs, he is currently just S tier. Even though he has an insane early game, his current problem now is he just gets outscaled by all of the other S and S+ tier junglers, making him hard to play as the game goes on. If you're not able to get a perfect early game on this champion, you have to rely on your team to carry you on the later stages. Lilia was once an OP jungler but is now fallen off the meta, putting her in the A tier. Similar both to Gwen and Jax, not that effective early on and needs time to scale. Pray that your team doesn't lose in the first 10 minutes before you're able to help your team. Malphite is a viable jungler but is not really that strong, putting him in the C tier. He's just a tank and ulti bot, praying that your teammates can follow up since he would not be able to do anything else aside from his ulti. Master Yi is like a balance in between both worlds, really strong in low ranks but struggles in the higher ranks, putting him a solid A tier. This champion depends on the opponents if they're able to punish this champion or not. Morgana was once a strong jungler but has now fallen from grace, falling into the B tier. The reason why is because her damage is not as strong compared to before and is very team dependent, needs a carry to follow up on her stunts. Nasus, another jungler that falls on C tier. If you want an AFK jungler that does not do anything, then this is your pick. Nautilus though is an A tier champion, building him AP, getting an early game lead. He's similar to Fizz where he can just one-shot everyone if he's able to get a snowball. Nila is a viable jungler but she falls on the B tier. Really lackluster early game. Her late game is quite strong but not as strong as the other hyper-scaling junglers, and that is why she's currently placed here. Nunu, a solid all-around tank. If you need someone to peel or crowd control for you, then this is your pick. Good objective control but lacks the power to carry games. That's why he's an A tier pick. Olaf is very similar to Lee Sin, who is insane early game but needs to get a snowball in order to become effective. If Olaf gets behind in the early game, then it's just very hard for him to carry as the game goes on. Ornn has jungle potential, good ganks, but the problem with this champion is his clear speed. It's really slow, even compared to other tank junglers, putting him in the B tier. Pantheon, a low-key strong jungler, will be in the S tier. Same boat as Olaf and Lee Sin. These three champions are insane early game, but just gets outscaled as the game goes on. Pantheon, a bit more scaling since his ultimate passive gives him damage even if it goes to the late game, but it's still very hard to carry with him in the later stages of the game. Pyke jungle was once a thing but is now a hit or miss, putting him in a B tier. It's either you get early kills and snowball the game, or you can't do anything at all. Ramos, an underrated tank, I think this falls on the A tier. Dependent on his opponents, can be very annoying to play against. He's the perfect tank jungler that could peel and gank at the same time. Renekton jungle is actually viable, but he just falls on B tier. Very dependent on getting an early game lead. Even though he can clear decently, he just falls off, especially when behind. Rengar is my personal favorite jungler. I'll put him in the S+ tier since he could do everything that a jungler needs. Building him pure tank, he has good clear speed, strong side lane, insane team fights, good catch potential, and can even carry while building pure tank. Then we go to Riven, underrated jungler. I think she's still in the S tier since she's very versatile and would be able to catch people and carry at the same time. She just needs a bit of time and kills to snowball properly. Samira jungle is actually viable, but she just falls on B tier, needs a team to be built around her, and can easily be countered just by buying Repulsor. Set jungle looks good, really strong ganks, but it just falls on the B tier as well. Similar to Ornn, really slow clear timer, and dependent on the team. Shen jungle, despite being dependent, is actually an A tier champion. Strong early game damage and global presence preventing his teammates from getting ganked. He just lacks the damage as the game goes on in order to carry the team. Shyvana, I think, is S+. Even though her early game is not that strong, she makes up for it by having an insane clear speed, allowing her to scale faster than your traditional hyper-scaling jungler. Once she's able to get 1 to 2 items, putting her in the right position, she should be able to just carry those team fights. Sion jungle is similar to Dr. Mundo and Nasus, goes on the C tier. If you just want to have a random scaling tank, then Sion is your pick. Tryndamere is very interesting because of his dynamic, but he just falls on the B tier since he would need time to scale and is a champion that is easily kiteable. Twitch jungle falls on the A tier but is the most coin flip champion right now. It's either he's so annoying to play against and snowballs the game, or he's not able to get any ganks off and becomes useless. That's why when you're facing against a Twitch jungle, you have to pray that he does not get early kills. Vi is another personal favorite of mine, but I will just put her on the S tier since even though she has strong early to mid game, she falls off a bit late game and becomes a CC bot, and you have to pray that your team would be able to carry you when it reaches that point. Volibear is actually similar to Vi, but is in the S+ tier since even though it gets to the later stages, he is very strong, counters almost all of the bruiser junglers, and would be able to damage and tank at the same time. Insane tower diving potential, which makes him definitely an S+ tier champion. Warwick is a jungler that I don't see often right now, but is definitely an A tier pick. Very underutilized second skill. If you know how to use it well, then you should be able to catch a lot of people off guard. His mechanics are just a bit clunky, and that is why you don't see him that much. Wukong is another jungler that's really strong but just falls on the A tier. The reason being is that even though he has annoying crowd control and good sustain, he is very dependent on his teammates to follow up on his engages. Xin Zhao is a jungler that's actually in between S and A tier, but I'll just put him on S since he's a very versatile jungler who would be able to tank and carry at the same time. His ultimate is broken, especially when fighting against multiple rage champions. Yone is another champion that's in between S and A, but I'll put him on S as well, even though he's similar to Gwen, wherein they both need to scale in order to become effective later on. Yone's ganks are a bit stronger due to the fact that he has double knockup with his first skill and ultimate. Yasuo, I know why is he here, but he can actually jungle, but since this is a champion you don't want to see in your games, I'll just put him in the C tier. Last but not the least would be Zed. Is actually a solid A tier pick. He's similar to Fizz, wherein if you're able to do well early on, you would be very scary to play against in the later stage of the game. If you're a Zed one trick, then Zed jungle definitely has a spot for you. And that is it with our tier list. If you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to comment down below. But for now, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Ciao, ciao.